Welcome to the All for the Gators podcast.
Episode 2, All for the Gators podcast. I'm your host, John Spano, joined by Andy Pankratz and Sid Kafka. Coming in hot with episode 2. Episode 1 with Chris Rainey, very well received. Got some good feedback on it. A lot of good social media interactions. Very pleased with the amount of downloads for our very first debut episode. And remember, we're not backed by a bunch of sponsors. You're not going to hear 10 commercials during this podcast. This is a grassroots effort. We're 3 alumni of the University of Florida. We're diehard fans. We just want to bring the Gator greats back and talk to them. And I hope all the members of Gator Nation will enjoy listening to it and learning about these Gator greats and remembering everything they did and gave to the university and all the memories they gave us, right, as fans by listening to this podcast.
Yeah, it's cool to talk to them and kind of hear stories from when they were playing and then kind of what they're doing now.
And I'm really excited of how it's performing already after just one debut show. Gentlemen, what do you think of that episode?
It was awesome. Chris was great, very open, very honest. He went places we didn't expect him to go, which was really cool. Yeah, he brought it. He definitely brought it. That was a great episode 1.
He was very generous with his time and definitely a tough act to follow. I can't wait to see what you got in store for us next because that was an amazing start.
Next, we're booked for like a month and a half with Gator greats, guys. Can you believe it?
All right.
That is crazy.
Pretty damn awesome.
As they say in Braveheart, I didn't get all dressed up for nothing.
Check us out on Instagram, All for the Gators podcast. We're on Facebook as well. Thinking about putting us up on YouTube. I haven't decided yet. Andy, are you going to get on Instagram at any time?
I don't know. Maybe.
Nobody's got a smaller digital footprint than this guy, Andy Pankratz.
That's right. Off the radar.
I'm Spano_rocks on Instagram. Sid Kafka, you're Sid Kafka, right? No spaces?
I actually don't think I have an Instagram. I'm a little too old for that.
You do have Instagram.
Oh, you see that? I didn't even know.
Oh, my God.
I follow you.
No, he hasn't. Oh, my God.
So listen, guys, I'm a former rock DJ. I've interviewed Slash. I've interviewed Weiland, Rob Zombie. I've never really fanboyed out during a rock interview, but this is different.
Uh-oh.
I may just fanboy out today a little bit. So you're going to have to forgive me.
Man, that could be a handful of guys that come to mind.
For what? For me to fanboy out?
Yeah.
Rock stars or
no.
Gator greats?
No, I'm obviously thinking Gators, and I know who some of your favorites are. So
go ahead, give them to me.
Oh man, well,
we were there in the time of Rex, so we all have a special place in our heart for Rex.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Rex, Gaffney. I know you take Casey.
Absolutely.
Spurrier. That's kind of pipe dream.
That would be the biggest show, right? That would be the biggest show we could possibly do. Would be Spurrier.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, this one's not going to be far behind it.
All right.
You're going to leave us in suspense. When do we get to find out who our next guest is?
When he joins.
I guess that would be important, wouldn't it?
Well, you know what Joe Hayden's doing now? Kicking his feet up. Did you guys hear the news?
I had not.
I did not.
Joe Hayden is retiring from the NFL. He signed a 1-day contract today with the Cleveland Browns to retire.
Wow.
Has anybody ever done that? Signed a 1-day contract with the Browns?
Yeah, I would have thought you would have said Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the best corners that we've produced post-Gator career.
Oh, my goodness.
He was really good for a while there.
BBU.
Yeah, no, he was ridiculous.
Legit, I assumed he was still one of the starting corners on Pittsburgh. When you said he retired, I didn't even notice that. I thought he was still like in their rotation.
Dynamite research there.
I know, right?
He was a first-round pick. 7th overall. I forgot he went that high.
12-year NFL career, 3 Pro Bowls.
Yeah, I get signing the one to do with Cleveland, man. That's pretty cool. They gave you that kind of a shot. That's
and he
cool.
spent more than half his career there. Makes sense.
He's like their best player in their secondary in our lifetime for Cleveland. I mean, think about it. Like, who they had.
Can you name another Browns defensive back in history?
Give me
Ready? You have 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Don't Google it. 4, 5. Just one more, Sid. 6, 7.
Eric
8,
McMillan, I think, after
9.
his time with the Jets and the Eagles, played with them briefly.
Andy, you want to check that, please? Eric McMillan. Wow. He actually played 3 games for the Browns in 1993. Sid, that is impressive, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Well, don't ever doubt my knowledge of wealth of useless information over here. Come on, especially about the Jets. So now that we established that I know everything about football and a wealth of useless information, when do we get to find out the guest?
All right, how about right now? Fellas, we may have crescendoed here in episode 2, Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Oh, yeah.
Our guest today is not just a Gator great. He's a true Gator legend. He was a Gainesville kid born and bred at P.K. Young High School. He was all-state in football, all-state in basketball, and all-state in baseball as well. His dream of catching touchdowns for the Gators seemed bleak, though. But with true grit determination, he was able to not only walk onto the team, but ended up solidifying one of the most prolific collegiate careers for a wide receiver at UF, in the SEC, and in NCAA history.
Oh, boy.
Any ideas, guys? Come on.
Yeah, I do. Keep going, but I got
In
it.
the orange and blue, he was a huge part of Spurrier's fun and gun offensive revolution we see in the NFL today. 3-time SEC champ, played for the Natty in 95 when he was team captain, earned first-team All-SEC honors, led the SEC in catches with 70 in all college football, reaching Gator 17 times.
I got it.
Who? Give it to me.
CD, Chris Doering, baby.
Yep.
All right. He would finish his stellar Gator career with a then SEC record 31 touchdown receptions. In 96, the Jags drafted the local boy Done Good, but traded him to the Colts. He went on to play for the Broncos, Redskins, Steelers. He was enshrined in the UF Athletic Hall of Fame in 2006 and was ranked the 19th greatest Gator of the first 100 years of football in 2006 by the Gainesville Sun. Today, he can catch his expertise as an analyst on the SEC Network. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you not just a Gator great, he's absolute Gainesville royalty, Mr. Christopher Paul Doering.
Wow.
Awesome.
What a complete biographical introduction, man. I appreciate the thoroughness there, bro.
Yeah, no problem. So all-state in 3 sports.
Yep, I tell everybody all the time I had the greatest senior year in the history of senior years. I was all-state in football, all-state in basketball, all-state in baseball, won the state basketball championship. I was the MVP of the state basketball tournament. And, oh, by the way, I was Sky Masterson in our musical theater production of Guys and Dolls. So it was an opportunity at PK Young. I thought that when you were reading off the bio that somebody might be able to get that when you said PK Young. But then I started thinking about it. You know, you could go with Willie Jackson. You could go with Terry Jackson. You could go with Travis McGriff. In fact, I think it was 99 in the NFL. We had 5 guys from tiny PK Young in the NFL at the same time, which I thought was pretty crazy to think about given how small. Yeah, no doubt.
That has to be unusual. We can't imagine that happens out of too many high schools.
Not too many high schools in general, but we had 92 people in my graduating class. And
I was going to say, that's not a big school.
No, not at all. So something I'm very proud of. And I have to say, you know, I give a lot to John Clifford, who was my coach at PK Young. He also played at Florida. Randall Leith was my basketball coach, who also played at Florida. And Bobby Hawkins was my baseball coach, who also played baseball at Florida. So it was like these coaches that I had an opportunity to learn from. And this is why I hate when coaches try to make people specialize in just one sport. Like, I learned so much from these coaches in the other sports and from playing those sports that really helped my football career too. So I just can't say enough about what going to PK Young and the people that were there, the teachers that were there, did for my life and my career and what I've been able to do after my football career as well.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Did you ever pro wrestle at PK Young?
I did not pro wrestle.
I bring that up because I believe I pro wrestled at PK Young one match.
Did you?
Really? I was doing the morning show on Rock 104, and an independent wrestling federation or whatever they call them was coming through town. And this guy kept calling the show right before they were coming and harassing me. So we decided to put him on the air, and he challenged me to a match. You know, they get free promotion out of it. Yeah. You know, it's a fun thing for the station. So I was like, what the hell? So I went to High Springs for 3 days. I trained on how to pro wrestle, and then we had the event.
How'd it go?
It was fun, man. I loved it. You know, we all grew up Hulkamaniacs and all that. Yeah. So it was a pretty cool experience.
What year was that?
I want to say 99.
Okay.
Did you say your prayers and eat your vitamins before the match?
No, I came out to Motley Crue, Kickstart My Heart.
Oh,
perfect choice.
Let's get back to Chris. This is not about me.
No problem.
Growing up in Gainesville, your parents were both Gators. Your dad was a professor at the university, right? They took you to all the games, not just football, all sports and everything.
Yeah.
Who were your favorite Gator athletes, you know, when you were a kid?
Yeah, man, well, it would start with Chris Collinsworth. I mean, he was the guy that I really tried to pattern my game after, pattern my career after. You know, I feel like I've followed in his footsteps a lot with playing at Florida. As you guys mentioned, I was at Cincinnati briefly there, which I thought was going to be a great fit and didn't end up working long term. But got into the media stuff kind of because of him too. So he was somebody that's had a big impact on my life. Man, I look at all these players that I had a chance to watch and want to be like. Man, Kerwin Bell was somebody I looked up to that's subsequently become a friend. Ricky Natil was a receiver that I really loved. I mean, just so many of these different guys. I remember wanting to be like Steve Lombardozzi when he got to the major leagues. Like, there's just so
The
many
Twins,
great.
right? He played
Yeah,
for
the
the Twins.
Twins. Yeah. So
Very cool.
I just that was what was so cool about growing up here in Gainesville, was just having the opportunity to go to all of these different sporting events. And shoot, my parents and I we'd go to gymnastics meets, and just really a unique opportunity as a kid to grow up in a college town like Gainesville. And so that's why I was so happy to have my kids be able to kind of grow up the same way that I did. They also went to PK Young, and so many of the teachers that I learned from are still there, and the next generation of kids from the parents that I went to school with are there too. So Gainesville just an awesome place to grow up, man.
I've seen some pictures on social media that you had posted, and I think your son's in some of them. And he seems like a pretty big dude. Is he an athlete too? Is he playing sports?
He's an athlete. Yeah, he played football at PK, played some basketball as well in his younger years, but has given it up now. You know, I always felt like it was kind of challenging for him to go to the same school that I did, to have the same last name, obviously, to play the same position, and
Sure.
people expected a lot from him. But he played, receiver and did a good job, and now has moved on. He's up in Savannah at SCAD, and looking forward to getting on with learning a little bit more about graphic design and trying to find his place in the world.
I read an article. It was about your recruiting, and I think your dad talks about it a little bit. When
recruiting is maybe using it a little strongly. Like, I don't think nobody was recruiting me. I was actually trying to make myself recruited, but recruiting might have been a little bit of a misleading term. But
how does that happen at 6'4", wide receiver, all state, not be recruited? I mean, there had to be some programs, interested.
It's interesting though. I think now I probably would have been able to been recruited elsewhere. People would have seen some of the stuff on Huddle or whatever. But back in the day, it really didn't. Recruiting didn't happen the same way. It's all about hype back then. And if somebody says something, it would be bought by somebody else, and they'd start selling it too. And I think a lot of times here in Florida, like, a lot of people thought, oh, they're right under the shadow of Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. If the Gators aren't recruiting him, he must not be any good. So I'm grateful for the way it happened. Like, if I'd have been given a scholarship offer to Wake Forest or some other school, I probably would have taken it. So the fact that I didn't have a single scholarship allowed me to walk on here and ultimately take a path that I think was more gratifying for me in the end of the day, having to prove myself, the chip on the shoulder that it created, the work ethic that it created, the fear of complacency, that it instilled in me. Those things I would not have learned otherwise. And also, I got to the NFL over 10 years in the NFL. I got cut 10 different times. I moved around 22 different times from the time I left Florida to the time I retired. So, like, all of these things prepared me for the next thing, which prepared me for the next thing. And I can't be more grateful for the path that I thought was a curse at the time ended up being such a blessing for me.
You talk about the chip, right? Is that something that's more of a badge of honor now for you with all the success you ended up having?
It's so funny you say that, because forever, I was embarrassed by the walk-on term. And I remember my redshirt freshman year, I made the travel squad. There was a preview in one of the publications about, each of the players at the different position groups. And when they were featuring the wide receivers, they had everybody, and they had Chris Doering, and they said lanky walk on. And like, that was all they said about me. It's like, that's all that they considered me at the time. So I always wanted to prove people wrong. And, I remember that day when Coach Spurrier, during the middle of two-a-days after our morning practice, called everybody up after practice and made the typical announcements, and then, said they were putting me on scholarship. And I remember the excitement from all of my teammates. They were more excited for me than I was. And it was just like, they had seen the work that I had put in. They knew I was deserving of it. I think for me, it was validation. And I thought I finally was able to be looked at like everybody else. I was finally able to shed that walk-on tag,
You couldn't drop
only to
it.
see later, as people would write about me, it was former walk-on Chris Doering. So I never was able to completely shed myself of that. But I do think it's something I look back at now as a badge of honor, and something that I certainly embrace much more than I used to.
Now, these days, when a player gets put on scholarship, it's sort of a thing for it to be recorded when he's told, and then, the team celebrates around him. Obviously, there was no internet back then. And you had mentioned that Spurrier, he called you up? How did that go down?
There was internet, by the way. It just wasn't social media.
I remember walking across campus at Florida and somebody telling me about this machine they had. You could plug into the phone jack and it would get you information. Like, it seemed really out there at the time. But I think, it was a coach called the whole team up after practice. We were sitting, everybody taking a knee around him. And, he was going through his announcements. And at the end, made the announcement about me earning a scholarship. And, just one of those things that, for whatever reason, I always knew I was going to earn a scholarship. I knew I was going to play. I knew I was going to have a big part in some sort of historical way in this football program that I grew up loving so much. I don't know how, and I don't know why, and I don't know what it exactly was, but I was always confident in that. And, it probably defies all logic and defies all odds, but for whatever reason, I always believed that was going to be the case. And, the way it played out is even better than I ever could have imagined.
So after all that work and you finally get to run out in the field and earning it, as you said, being the former walk-on, what was that like, being in front of 80,000 people on that side of things, having been in the stadium and the crowd not that long ago yourself? Do you remember?
I was still a walk-on. Yeah, I was still a walk-on at that point in time. My first year in the fall of '91, I was getting redshirted, so I still was sitting in the stands or wasn't down on the field with the team at that point. They were I don't know why, but I wasn't. But '92, I made the travel squad, so I was still a walk-on that year. But I think we played San Jose State that first game, and I remember running out of that tunnel. Like, I had always dreamed. My seats were in, and still parents still sit there. Section 6, row 9, seat 28, 29, and 30. And I remember wanting to run out of that tunnel, the Here Come the Gators, and just what that would feel like, man. And having an opportunity to do it, it was even better than I ever could have imagined. Now, I the other thing I remember from that game is how bad I had to pee by halftime because I hydrated a lot and didn't get a chance to play. And so running to the locker room to get some relief was one of the more enjoyable feelings. But like, when I was actually playing, the feeling of running out of that tunnel, maybe more so than the feeling of running out of the tunnel, the feeling of catching a touchdown in front of 90,000 in the place that I grew up, in the program that I grew up cheering for, like, it was maybe one of the most gratifying, most exhilarating feelings in all of the world. And the problem is I dreamt as a kid, all I wanted to ever do was play football for the Gators and play in the NFL. And I had done both of those things, and it was over with by the time I was, 32, 33 years old. And so it's a blessing that you get a chance to do that, but it's also a curse because there's a lot of years to live the rest of your life without having the same passion about something that I did for playing at Florida, and for not having the sort of the feedback that you get from 90,000 people screaming for something you did. That doesn't happen in a normal walk of life. So it's something that I've had to adjust to. I think every player does, when your career is finally over with, trying to figure out, what's next for you and how you kind of replace some of that adrenaline rush that you got from playing with something else. And I think that's what's been great for me about the TV stuff. I love working for the SEC Network, ESPN, and love the crew that I work with, the teamwork that goes into, the shows that we prepare for Friday and Saturday, the adrenaline rush you get from being on live television, the celebration after our show on Saturday night where we go out and have a few beers together really emulates that feeling of being in a locker room and having all of those different relationships and experiences together as a team.
You ever watch the movie Rudy and think to yourself, my story is a million times better than
There's
that?
No question. It pisses me off every day. Rudy barely got on the field and had supposedly one sack. Dude,
Exactly.
that's nothing in compared to what I got a chance to do. So definitely do.
That's awesome.
All right, Chris, you ever get tired of this?
Oh, Mick.
Hard to get tired of that. I'll be honest with you. It's a
Good old Mick.
Something that still gives me chills to hear, and it doesn't seem like next September 11th, 2023 will be 30 years. I caught that pass September 11th, 1993, there in Lexington, and the funny thing about it, everything happened so quickly. Like I told you guys, I got put on scholarship. That literally was probably 3 weeks before the Kentucky game. So I get put on scholarship towards the end of 2-a-days. The opening game of the season, I'm playing. I get 4 catches in the swamp. It's awesome. We play Kentucky the second week of the season. Coach Spurrier tells me before the game I'm going to start. And in the beginning of the fourth quarter, I catch my first career touchdown reception. Here I am, was a walk-on a couple weeks earlier. Now I'm starting. I've caught my first touchdown against an SEC opponent. I think that I've achieved the pinnacle of everything I've ever dreamt of, only to find out that I'd catch the game winner with 3 seconds left in a moment that would kind of define the rest of my life. You know, I caught 29 more touchdowns after that, but the one that everybody remembers is the Doering's got a touchdown one from my sophomore year.
Yeah, so your touchdown record when you finished your Gator career at the time was an SEC record and a Gator record. It still stands at UF. Do you see that getting broken anytime soon with the new transfer portal, players leaving early, things like that? I mean,
yeah,
Jabbar obviously got close with a couple years of stats, but I don't know. I'm not sure it's going to get broken anytime soon. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that. It is, you know, people leaving early and moving around, that definitely plays a part. But also, you know, the proliferation of the passing game too. What we were doing was very unique. Now everybody's kind of doing a lot of the same things. So there are more opportunities as well. But you go back and look for a while. Even I think if you look at that list, like I held that record for 25 years. Devontae Smith broke it 2 years ago. If you go back and look at that list, it's littered with Florida receivers that played for Coach Spurrier, you know, and it just goes to speak to the things that Coach Spurrier was doing well ahead of his time, what anybody else was doing, and the way that he revolutionized the game of college football. Man, it's just a really special thing for me as a lifelong Gator fan, growing up the son of 2 Florida grads who told me about what Steve Spurrier meant, you know, as a player, and that was like really the only thing that you could celebrate as a Florida fan for a long time. There were no national championships. There were no SEC championships. There was nothing except the one Heisman Trophy winner we had. And for him to come back in 1990 and take over the program and then to lead us to kind of the success that we did, that springboarded us to the 3 national titles that the school now has, the 3 total Heisman Trophy winners, you know, all the different records and success that we had in the SEC record books. It's just really cool to have been a part of that whole run-up.
Well, Chris, with you being such a big part of Gator history, catching passes from 2 of the most prolific quarterbacks ever, and Shane Matthews and, of course, Danny, tell us some of the differences and some of your favorite, obviously the Kentucky game, but some of your favorite memories.
Yeah, you know, the majority of my passes came from Danny Warfel, obviously. And I think the thing that was so cool, and I don't know if I ever caught one from Shane in a game. Terry Dean was the one that I probably caught the second most from, but
good job, Sid.
Danny, that's all right. Danny was, you know, I remember like Monday nights during the season, the guys that were young, getting redshirted, that weren't playing a lot, would play in what Coach Spurrier called Monday Night Football. It was a live scrimmage that we would do after practice when everybody else left, and it was, you know, going offense against defense, full tackling to the ground. And Danny and I were out there my redshirt freshman year. You know, he's a true freshman. We're connecting on some of these routes, catching some draw 2 pass pattern 7s, catching some 5 semis and 3 semis. And next thing you know, we're doing it in SEC venues. And again, everything happened so quickly for me my sophomore year. You know, I remember that feeling of walking across campus that Monday morning after I caught that pass against Kentucky and seeing people look at me differently and recognize me and picking up the alligator and reading stories about me. And it was such a surreal kind of feeling for somebody that had so much anonymity amongst the Gator football team, for it to change so quickly and for that to happen to me and Danny simultaneously after where we came from, you know, hooking up on the practice field in those Monday night scrimmages was really cool.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you how it felt to catch passes from Rex Grossman?
You can, but I would not be able to answer that question.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
God.
Out of all those touchdowns, did you get to keep any of the balls? You know, what kind of keepsakes do you have from your Gator career?
Yeah, the only one that I have a tremendous amount of game balls that we were given. You know, Coach Spurrier would have wore game balls after the game, but the only actual ball that I have that was one of my touchdown catches was the one that I caught to break the record. The record breaker was the 30th. I caught it in the swamp on senior day against Florida State, staying undefeated in the way to, you know, getting to the national championship. It could not have been a better storybook ending. It was such a kind of a bookend career for me. That first touchdown against Kentucky, the second one being the Doering's got a touchdown one, and then the final one in the swamp there to break the record. It was really kind of a cool way that played out timeline wise. I caught one more in the subsequent SEC championship game, but like that's the one ball I remember taking that. I remember handing it to the referee in the northwest corner of the end zone after I scored, and then realizing what it was and seeing it up on the board about being the record breaker, and went and grabbing it back from him. And so that is one that I have right behind me up here on my in my trophy room.
Very nice. Do you have the ball from your touchdown pass? Here's a did you know. Chris had a 304.5 quarterback rating at UF.
Yeah.
Tell us about that play.
Yeah. Shoot, I was kind of the designated thrower on some of the trick plays. So the one I threw the touchdown on was to Terry Dean. I believe it was against Vanderbilt, but we practiced this. It was a reverse pass throwback to the quarterback, and we had run it 1,000 times. I believe Eric Rett was the running back that had handed it to me. Every time it works perfectly. They pitch it to him coming around the left. He hands it back to me coming from the left side of the formation. And then I throw it back to Terry, who's got a group of linemen over there to block for him. So when Eric hands it to me, I muff the handoff, and somehow it bounces twice, and then on the second bounce, it takes a big bounce right back up to me. It was the most fortuitous thing ever, because I think it ended up working better because it took longer and everybody got sucked further over there to me, and then I threw it back across the field where Terry was and had a convoy of blockers down the sideline for the easy touchdown, man.
That's crazy.
And then maybe the more famous pass I threw was the one in the SEC championship in '94 against Alabama in that close game where we ran a bunch of trick plays down the field to set up the game-winning touchdown. So we ran Emory and Henry stuff on that drive. We faked an injury to Danny Warfel coming off to have Kresser come in and throw one unexpectedly down the sideline to Sorolla Palmer. We ran the double pass that I threw to Aubrey Hill that got us down to the 2-yard line, and then Danny checked to the 97 out to the side where he threw me the touchdown for the game winner. So that was probably my favorite throw, was the one in the title game in that big moment.
So with the current team, talk a little bit about them a little bit. Anthony Richardson struggled a little bit lately. If you were a receiver playing with him right now, kind of what would you be working on with him or talking to him about, or trying to help him with? Is there kind of anything you had to do maybe with Danny at any time? Is there anything that comes
Danny
to
was
mind?
unflappable.
I figured,
Danny's one of those guys, and I wish Anthony had more Danny in him. Danny was able to shake off the bad things. Danny was able to shake off Coach Spurrier yelling at him. He was able to glean whatever the information was that Coach Spurrier was trying to communicate to him, but not be affected by the yelling. And I think that's, the one thing I'd like to see from Anthony is have a shorter memory, be able to turn the page. You make a bad throw, screw it, man. Let's move on to the next play. Like the fact that he's admitted a couple times that he's had a mistake that's kind of haunted him the rest of the game is troubling to me. So if I'm his teammate, if I'm one of his coaches, if I'm one of his parents, I'm telling him, hey, you got to be able to move on. I mean, that's what I love about football. Football is such a great vehicle for teaching kids about life. There's so many lessons that can be learned. And maybe the biggest lesson amongst all of them is the ability to brush yourself off when you fail, come back for the next play, and be able to move on.
Yeah, well said. I definitely don't remember Danny struggling too much, but I do remember Spurrier in his ear a lot.
All right, we're going to have a segment here called 5 for 5, and I'm going to name 5 players. You tell me the first thoughts that come to your mind. All right, Chris?
Sure.
Number 1, obviously, Anthony Richardson.
Amazing athlete, explosive, just been touched by God, and a guy that has the sky's the limit in terms of what his ceiling is.
Number 2, Ricky Pearsall.
Man, quick, great route runner, nice hands, makes things look smooth and easy.
3, Ventrell Miller.
Tremendous leader. That's the thing that I look at the most with Ventrell is obviously he's very productive. The guy is just a leader. You look at when he's not on the field versus when he is on the field, there's significant drop-off in terms of the defensive performance. So leader is what I think of first, and maybe more so after that, or next after that is just Gator. I mean, the guy has chosen to come back and play here for another year, loves being a Gator, and to me that's something that I identify with and love the players like myself that really took joy in being a Florida Gator.
Number 4, our running back stable. Johnson, Etienne, and Wright?
Strength of the team. I think the strength of our team is the offensive line and those three running backs. And I think that Florida just needs to accept that is what the team identity is going to be. I think it's a great game plan this week against Tennessee to, hey, let's hold on to the ball. Let's possess it. Let's stay ahead of the chains. Let's get ourselves in a lot of 3rd and 3 situations. Let's run the ball on 1st and 2nd down. Let's use the play action pass off of that and be able to allow Anthony to make some throws outside of the pocket and put pressure on the defense with his ability to run. Like, the running backs are a tremendous complement to what AR can do with his running ability.
Number 5, Desmond Watson. That tackle last week.
Massive. Needs to lose about 50 pounds, but he has the ability to be an anchor on that defensive front. Yeah, the tackle against South Florida, making that
like
kid
a rag doll.
look like a yeah. I mean, it was impressive. But yeah, I'd like to see him get in a little better shape. You got to be able to be in better shape to be able to play the minutes that Florida needs, especially right now. Like, the big deficiency on this Florida team is defensive line. They don't have the depth of talent that you need to be able to compete in this league, and that's why you're seeing Florida's D get torched in the second half with opposing teams running the ball right down their throat.
Yeah, you mentioned the running backs. I was watching the SEC Network postgame show. You had the alma mater advice section. Well, actually, before I go there, I got to ask you this. I've always been a big fan of Dari Noko. I think he just does a great job.
Yeah.
How is it working with him? I'm just curious.
Dari's like playing with John Stockton. He's the great facilitator, man. It was unselfish, wants to set you up, so smooth, never panics. We have this thing, like, we have snacks. It started back with Booger McFarland. This is my 8th season with the SEC Network and working with those guys. But it started with me and Booger and Dari. We used to bring snacks into the studio on Saturdays. So we'd have mango slices, dried mango slices. We'd have almonds. We'd have other mixed nuts. And like, I remember one time, man, I took a handful of nuts right before we were coming back from a break, man, and like choking on some nut particles. And so Dari's such a professional. He likes to prove to me that he can throw a handful of nuts in his mouth right before we come back and it not bother him. I'm like, bro, you're tempting fate. You got to stop doing that. But he's just so smooth and unflappable, man. It's a pleasure working with him, and even better to be a friend. He's really a close friend. I think that's why you see the kind of chemistry that we all have on that Saturday show. It's just a unique friendship that we've had and a comfort that we've developed over the years together.
Yeah, you can definitely see the chemistry. So on the show, you talked a little bit about the offensive line and running the ball. Totally agree. I'd like to see Richardson move a little more, but you agree with that, or do you think maybe there's something?
I think so. I mean, that's what was so effective in the game against Utah, and that's kind of what's been so curious about the lack of attempts. Everybody's got their conspiracy theories about whether he's hurt or not. Certainly,
right.
That hit he took against Kentucky early on, he looked like it affected him. Secondly, the fact that Jack Miller's out, and the idea that he's got to protect himself to be in the lineup. And, he was very injury prone last year. That's one of the things I said. This team in the preseason is only going to go as far as Anthony Richardson can take him. And one of the things he needs to do is consistently be in the lineup. And so, I think he's trying to balance right now. How do I go out and play and cut it loose and do the things I've always done? At the same time, how do I make myself, available for the next snap? How do I avoid the shots that could potentially take me out of the lineup? And so I think right now he's just thinking too much. He's got to get back to just playing. And I agree we had Coach Napier on Monday morning on our show on the SEC Network. And I asked him, I said, you know what? My feeling walking away from watching the game on Saturday night was very negative. When I watched the tape on Sunday, there were a lot of good things that I saw. The tape is never as bad or never as good as you think it is. And when I went back and watched, I thought Richardson made some really good throws. But he's got to get away from this idea of thinking so much, because when he thinks, that's when he makes mistakes. It's almost like Chuck Knobloch or Steve Sachs back in the day. When you think about making that throw from second to first, it's the easiest throw in the world, but when you start thinking about it, it becomes very challenging.
Obviously, this wasn't around when you were playing, but what do you think of like the NIL deals? How I'm sure as a former player, you're probably all for it. What are your thoughts?
Look, I'm very jealous of everything these guys have. The new facility, all the bells and whistles that they have in there, the opportunities for NIL earnings. Like I'm happy that they're getting a cut. I don't love the rule necessarily. I'm very disappointed that the NCAA didn't address this when they had a chance to. If 10 years ago they said they weren't so greedy and didn't dig their heels into this idea of this amateurism that doesn't really exist, like, and started sharing some of the revenue in some way, or allowing players to make some money, it wouldn't be this crazy situation we're in right now where there's no rules whatsoever. I mean, I think there has to be rules and ever able to keep some sort of a level playing field. But I am excited that the players are able to take advantage of the name, image, and likeness. And I think that should include jersey sales. I think that it should include social media posts, being able to make appearances, signing autographs. But I am not for pay for play, and certainly not for recruiting inducements. I thought it was so funny over the summer to hear about the Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher dust up.
Oh, yeah.
Nick Saban's talking about how they bought every player. Every school is buying every player right
Sure.
now. I guarantee Florida bought the majority of their players. Like, that is the reality of NIL with no enforcement of the rules. And I know that people say that's not supposed to be for recruiting inducements, but everybody is doing it right now.
Have you been to the new facility? You mentioned it, but it looks ridiculous.
Yeah, I've been a few times, man. I am very jealous because we got these anti-gravity seats, each of them in their lockers. When I was there, we'd take a nap after our morning workouts at 6:15. We'd lay our laundry bags down, put a towel over us, and take an hour nap before we had to be in class. So it's a much different world these kids live in now.
Oh, for sure.
Chris, if they had NIL deals back in your day, which one would you be going for? Burrito Brothers?
Purple Porpoise.
That was my next one.
There you go. There you go.
I got it right off the bat. I mean, it would have to be some sort of place, we could go post game. I'm jealous in a way of the social media connectivity, and at the same time, probably grateful that wasn't a thing. But, like, could you imagine going out, catching a couple touchdowns, and then tweeting out that you're going to be at the Purple Porpoise later that night and have everybody show up to come hang out with you? I mean, it would have been tremendous.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We would have been there with you.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we would have. Well, before we let you go, you mentioned Spurrier a few times. So I want to ask you a little bit about the year you had with the Redskins, where he kind of brought back a bunch of Gators and a version of the fun and gun. He had you, Shane, Danny, Willie Jackson. Was that fun, kind of getting the band back together? Was it different?
It was awesome. It was awesome. And let me take you through kind of the chronology of what had happened. I had been in 99 and 2000. I was in Denver playing for the Broncos. I show up in Denver in 99. They coming off of winning the Super Bowl in 97, 98. John Elway retires, and we go 6-10 in 99. In 2000 in camp, like, I had a tremendous offseason. I'm working with Ed McCaffrey. He's like my mentor. I mean, really, really primed to have a bust-out year in the NFL. And then in our first preseason game, I tear my Achilles out in Arizona against the Cardinals, and kind of derailed my whole career. I was out the rest of that year, came back the next season, but really wasn't healthy yet, and got cut. And there was not a whole lot of suitors out there after that. I even got to the point where I was considering to go play in the Arena League, visited the Carolina Cobras, who I ended up signing with but didn't play with. And then I remember Coach Spurrier, after that 2001 season, making the announcement that he was leaving, and how devastated all the Gator fans were. And I was probably the only one that was happy at that point, because I knew Coach would sign me. I was one of the first guys that he signed when he got up to Washington. And it was really a lot of fun being with Coach and all the assistants that had been at Florida when I was there, and certainly with Danny and Shane and Jaquez and Riedel. And, just a big reunion for us, and a chance to reconnect with some of those guys, and playing an offense that I was obviously very familiar with, and had a chance to help everybody else kind of get up to speed at the receiver position that didn't know the offense as well. So, I owe a lot to Coach. Coach let me walk on, and as a preferred walk-on at Florida, gave me the right to compete like everybody else, and ultimately the chance to catch the touchdowns that I did, and have the opportunity to go to the NFL, and then revitalized my career after I'd been injured. So just had two of my best years, probably that year in Washington and the next year in Pittsburgh when I went to the Steelers. And just can't say enough. Outside of my parents, I don't know if there's anybody that's impacted my life the way that Coach Spurrier has.
A lot of times when there's like a national tragedy, what you were doing, where you were. And when the news came out that Spurrier was leaving Florida, I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in my car at work, in between offices. Where were you when you heard the news, and how did you react to it?
Golly, that's interesting. I don't remember exactly where I was when I heard the news. I remember that somebody from ESPN called me and asked me if I could come do an interview with Linda Cohn. Linda Cohn was on site in the swamp down in the south end zone, and I did an interview with her there about kind of what this meant and everything else. And then I remember going to see Coach afterwards as he was kind of cleaning out his office, and You know, I secretly, as I was lamenting the move with every other Gator fan, was happy inside because I knew it was going to give me another opportunity to play in the NFL again and play for him
Very
as well.
cool. I guess that squashes my my theory.
What was your theory?
That everybody knew where they were and what they were doing when they heard the news.
Yeah, you had different goals at that point.
Yeah, that's
I don't
cool.
remember exactly when I
Yes.
heard it, but at that point in time, you know, my focus had changed from being as big of a Gator fan to
Sure.
what can I do
Sure,
to keep
sure.
my NFL career going, you know?
All right, so it's time to do the Mount Rushmore of Florida Gator wide receivers, and not necessarily by numbers. Chris, who are your 4 on your Mount Rushmore of Florida Gator wide receivers?
So Percy Harvin is on there. Percy Harvin is the best player to ever play at Florida, and that may be sacrilegious. I've heard people kind of dispute that with me, but you go back and look at what he was able to do, not only as a receiver, but as a running back. I mean, the guy would have been a 1,000-yard rusher had he strictly played running back. And what he did for that Florida offense in 2008 versus what it was in 2009 after he left was totally different. Yeah, so I think Percy Harvin is clearly on there. You know, I gotta go with a couple of my guys. You know, I look at Ike Hilliard and Riedel Anthony. Those two are absolute legends, and it was a pleasure getting a chance to watch them come in '94 and the seasons, the career that they end up having. And I guess for me, I got to put Collinsworth on there, even though statistically probably wouldn't, you know, match up with so many of the other receivers that played at Florida. But he was the one that had such an impact for me that I, you know, still to this day look at as a real role model for me. So that would be my 4 probably.
Was TV and broadcasting, stuff like that, something you had wanted to get into?
Yeah. I got my degree. I got a journalism degree from the University of Florida in telecommunications. I knew I wanted to be on television.
So did John and I.
So did I.
So we were all J School members, right?
Yep,
So
that's right.
I'm very proud of that. I actually got a degree in production because I didn't have the time to do the out of classroom news side of things. So it actually was a blessing to kind of get the chance to see the behind the scenes stuff and what everybody else does to make the show come off smoothly.
Well, not a bad role model. You know, Collinsworth does an awesome job.
No question. No
Sure
question.
does.
Well, Chris, you've been more than gracious with your time today. Thank you for being on our show as we try to grow it for Gator Nation. You know, we're not getting a bunch of sponsors, doing it grassroots style. Our debut show last week did very well right off the bat. So we're really excited. And to have you on is just phenomenal on our second show. So thank you so much for taking the time for us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on with you guys. You know, despite what some fans think, there's not a bigger Gator fan in the world than me. And I love that the passion runs through all of you guys the same way that it runs through me.
We catch you on the SEC Network. Are you on certain shows? I know you're on the pregame and the postgames.
Yeah, it's a busy schedule this time of year, man. I head up to Charlotte on Thursday nights. I do a Friday morning show with Peter Burns called SEC This Morning. Then I do a Friday night preview show with Dari Noka and Takeo Spikes on SEC Now. And then Saturday we have the triple header on, of which we're doing the halftime, postgame, pregame, halftime, postgame, pregame, all the way up to the end of the night when we do our Saturday football final. And then on Monday morning, I got another SEC This Morning with Peter Burns, kind of wrapping up the weekend.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're all huge fans, obviously. And you're on all social media, right? If people who are listening want to keep track of you and see what you're up to.
Awesome.
I've been pushing the Instagram a little bit more, so I don't have to hear the negativity from everybody on Twitter. But my Instagram is cdoring28. And Twitter is @ChrisDoering.
Thank you so much, Chris. This was amazing.
Yeah, this is like an honor.
No, it's fun. Appreciate you guys.
All right, cool. Chris, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll be looking for you on the SEC Network.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, take care. Go Gators.
Gators.
Go Gator.
Wow.
That was awesome.
Yeah, he was great. Terrific interview.
No words, man. I got no words. That was...
He's almost as cool off the field as he was on it, and that's a big statement.
Yeah,
he was
man.
very humble, told us some awesome stories.
Yeah, great stories.
He gave us his Mount Rushmore of wide receivers, Florida Gator wide receivers. Now it's our turn.
All right.
Let's do it. Sid, you want to go first? Who's your Mount Rushmore Florida Gator wide receivers?
Well, I do have to give the disclaimer that I lived in Gainesville from 96 to 2000, so I am not old enough to remember the Wes Chandlers and Nat Moores and Chris Collinsworth. So with all due respect to the Pioneers, I got Percy agreeing with Chris Doering. Percy is the most exciting wide receiver I've ever seen. Doering's got the touchdowns. He's their number 2. Jabbar Gaffney was my favorite player while we were there. And although he was only with us for 2 years, those were two exciting years. And I'd give my fourth one, agreeing with Chris, Ike Hilliard. I'm very comfortable with that 4. That squad is going to give some defensive fits out there.
Very nice. Andy, what do you got?
Well, I think he saw my notes or something because I have the same bias. I'm biased from 95 to the present, but I've got Doering. Obviously stats and stories speak for themselves. I had Jabbar Gaffney. He's the Rex era wide receiver. Only 2 years of stats, but man, they are ridiculous. And I think he'd be the leader in a lot of categories if he stayed longer.
Definitely.
And of course, Percy's on there for sure. The performances in 06 and 08 definitely get him on the list. And then I was down to the tandem of Hilliard and Anthony. And I went with Hilliard because of the 7 for 163 touchdown performance in the 96 national championship game.
That is a good tiebreaker.
My first full year at UF. So that was a pretty cool way to start.
Very cool.
So same as Sid's. So
I am going to exclude Percy Harvin. Sorry.
Ooh.
I know.
Bold.
He was a game changer. Absolutely. And when he left, Tebow wasn't as effective.
The offense was not the same.
So the fact that Percy was sort of like a slash running back, slash wide receiver, that's why I left him out. I'm going with pure wide receivers. I want my guys on the ends, and these are my 4.
Well, if Percy ever comes on our show, we're going to tell him.
We're going to have to play the tape back.
Yeah, we're going to tell him that you did not put him on your Mount Rushmore. Sid and I did, though, so 2 out of 3.
Right. Percy is on my mount.
Hopefully he'll still talk to us.
Fair enough. All right. I'm going to go with Chris Doering, and that is no surprise to anybody. I'm also going to go with Jabbar Gaffney. So all 3 of us did. The breakaway speed, I mean, he would just run those slants, and Rex would hit him, and he was gone. And it happened a lot. I am also going to go with Ike Hilliard. And part of my reason is because he played for the Giants. Does that matter? Because I like the Giants from New York. So
you're a Dolphin fan.
Well, I grew up in South Florida, so I got an affinity for both teams. And Hilliard went from the Gators to the Giants.
He did.
So he's got a special place in my heart.
I feel the same way about Marcus May. Go Jets.
Here we go. My 4th one that nobody else selected, Darrell Jackson. D-Jack.
Nice.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, he was just an exciting wide receiver. He was dominant.
Real good at the next level, too, with Seattle. Played in the Super Bowl. Good receiver.
I thought you were going to go – there was 2 guys that I was thinking you were going to go for, one more realistic than the other. So I'll go with the unrealistic first. I was like, if he goes Dallas Baker, I know he's one of your favorites. But I thought you'd go Andre Caldwell. I thought he'd be on your list.
I'm telling you, he was one of the honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Probably the very next one.
Honorable mention, Jacquez Green.
All the wide receivers that came through UF.
Well, Chris hit it on the head with how many, you look back at those years, man, those Spurrier years. There's a lot of stats there.
Yeah?
Well, our lists are fairly similar. Can't say I'm surprised. Like, we were all there during a lot of those years where we got to see these guys, in the stadium. So I could see why we're a little slanted. And then being fresh out of school, watching some of these guys, that's when we were kind of in our heyday. I'm not surprised.
Unfortunately, none of those all-time receivers are presently on the squad as of yet. It looks like our running backs on the present team are good. I'd like to see some future wide receiver studs coming through there.
I really feel like Shorter and Pearsall have potential. I think they just need a consistent quarterback.
You're exactly right. They need to get some consistency going. We got to establish the run.
Yeah.
Things will open up.
All right. Before we go, guys, I want to say that the audio clip, Doering's Got a Touchdown, is courtesy of the Gator Sports Network and Gatorzone.com on YouTube. And fellas, another stellar effort.
Great show.
That was a lot of fun.
We got more booked.
I don't know how you top that one. I mean, that's a hell of a start with the 2 we've had so far. But that's tough to top.
We continuing the Chris trends? We're going to get some more former Gators named Chris?
Chris Leak, perhaps?
Ooh, possibly. I can't think of a Chris.
I just gave you one. Chris.
Right there on a platter.
Another one.
Collinsworth. Although it's spelled differently.
Right, like Chris Carter. Chris Carter changed his name to be like Chris Collinsworth. Did you know that?
No.
I don't know if you knew that.
That's not true, is it?
Look it up, kids. The things you will learn on this podcast. It's the All for the Gators podcast. Our special guest, Gator great Chris Doering, just brought down the house. I am John Spano, Andy Pankratz, Sid Kafka. Find us on Instagram. Not Andy. He has no digital footprint. Sid's on there. He doesn't know he's on there, but he is on there. And we'll catch you next time.
Go Gators!
Go Gators, guys.
Go Gators.